Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dannphan's Advice. Today we're going to be talking about overpowered characters. Now before I truly get into the meat of overpowered characters, first let's go over some definitions, as I'm sure there are plenty of people who have different definitions for certain terms, such as what people actually define as being overpowered. Overpowered is typically a negative term to refer to a character. Similar terms include the words Mary Stew or Gary Stew. So first, what is power in general? Well, power typically has to do with the ability of a character, what they can actually do in the story, how much power they have over the story. And in that sense, overpowered means that there's too much ability, there's too much control that character has over the story, and therefore this tends to make the story itself uninteresting, or the character themselves uninteresting. So while there are many writers out there who want to write very powerful, cool looking characters, they can be very timid about this because they're not sure how much power is too much power. They don't want to make their characters overpowered and have the story or character turn out uninteresting. So the real question you need to ask here is, where is the line between powerful and overpowered? To which, like I said before, people have different definitions and perspectives on how they feel a character could be overpowered. For instance, we all know that people like to take two characters from two different universes, put them together in a death battle, and try to debate who would win. And whoever wins in that type of death battle, that character is just declared overpowered. They're just overpowered. But of course, what you need to keep in mind is these characters are from two different universes. Those universes have different standards for what power is. Anyone can take a superpowered character from a comic book, place them in our world, and they would be declared overpowered because they're being compared to us. Being compared to normal people, they're all overpowered. What matters is how powerful they are in the context of their story, in their universe, because it's all about the interactions that character is having with their story and their universe. Theoretically, you can make a character as powerful as you want as long as it's balanced out in some way. What really makes the character overpowered is not the power itself, but rather the amount of control a character has over the story around them. If you create a Mary Sue character who is just perfect in every way, no flaws, infinitely powerful, everyone likes her, then there is no struggle for that character. No struggle would make sense for that character. And therefore, there would be no story. It would be uninteresting. It would be boring. After all, every story follows a very basic formula of conflict and then resolution. If there is a lack of believable conflict, if your character is perfect and has no reason for conflict, no reason for struggle, then there is no story. So getting back to my former question, where is the line between power and overpowered? It lies with believability. Is their struggle believable? Is the conflict believable? Does it break continuity? Is it too ambiguous? I know people will want to cover up overpowered characters with like some ambiguous answer as to why they have that power. She's just a normal girl, but then all of a sudden she has this power and she defeats the villain. And the audience is looking at each other like, where the hell did that power come from? And all the writer can say is, nobody knows. Well, thanks for nothing. The big thing about overpowered characters is that any conflict they will come across will be easily resolved, whether it has to do with them randomly discovering a new power and then everything's fine again, or if it has to do with their personality, just being able to charm people. It's like, oh, this guy's a villain, he's gonna kill you because he doesn't like you. But then you become friends because you're just so charming and wonderful. It's not exciting, and it has a tendency to become repetitive when the character is just made that way. And so the biggest way to avoid creating an overpowered character is usually to add flaws. Now I'll give you some examples of very powerful characters with flaws, but before that I want to break down what kind of flaws I'm going to be talking about. So let's say there are two types of flaws. There are character flaws that have to do specifically with the character's personality, and then there are plot flaws, flaws that are specifically written in the story to prevent them from having too much control over the story. A good example of this is Superman. Classic character that everyone calls too powerful. He's invincible, he can fly, he's super strong, and he has laser eyes. But when you actually read the comics, you know that he does have weaknesses that can easily make him vulnerable, such as the famous kryptonite, or of course, magic. Superman does not defend against magic very well. These are what I would refer to as plot flaws. These are flaws specifically written into the story to prevent Superman from being too powerful, to make it so that he has to struggle against something. And then what would be Superman's character flaws? Well, that would be referring to Clark Kent, who is clumsy, nervous guy who's infatuated with Lois Lane. Although that can change depending on which version of Superman you read. So we'll move on to another character, the famous One Punch Man. Saitama is a curious character, and I don't think that anyone can write Saitama, honestly. I think it takes a special type of skill. But the creation of his character was sort of parody-like. The writer basically decided what would happen if the whole plot of the story was that the character was too powerful, and now he was dealing with depression because he had no one else to fight. So right away, we have the flaw of Saitama. He's depressed, and he's a total loner, and he doesn't realize that he needs company, he needs some kind of goal. And for the most part, One Punch Man is all about Saitama reaching out to other people, making new friends, and trying to push past his own depression, trying to get that spark back into his life. Most of the series has to do with a very powerful villain showing up, none of the heroes being able to defeat the villain, and then Saitama defeats him in one punch. Saitama is treated like a punchline. A very comedic end to a conflict, but he still maintains character flaws of his own depression, and that's where his character arc mainly focuses on, him trying to find a spark back into his life. So now the question is, does this character flaw make up for the fact that Saitama is overpowered? And the answer is actually no. The writer himself realized this pretty early on, which is exactly why he was introducing new characters, new and different focuses to have in the story. And Saitama got himself smacked with some plot flaws, such as the fact that he's always late. He's not going to show up there right away. He's going to show up at the last minute, and until then, all the other characters will be in danger. So this will keep people biting their nails in anticipation. And there will be all kinds of reasons why Saitama is not there for the fight. Sometimes comedic, sometimes he just has a different role to play. Writer realizes that making Saitama too much of a focus of the story will make it too repetitive, too basic, too uninteresting. So he has to keep Saitama from defeating the villain very quickly. He has to keep him away from the story sometimes. And like I said, that's kind of difficult to do, especially when the name of the show is One Punch Man and people want to see Saitama. So if you're still confused by character flaws versus plot flaws, I'll give you one more example. The newest example, the Sonic movie. Now, Sonic is very powerful in that movie. And if you see my review, you know that the reason why I think it works for that movie is because the writing works really hard to limit how much control he has over the story. So let's start talking flaws. His mental state, character flaw. Spaghetti legs, plot flaw. Inability to swim, plot flaw. No sense of direction, plot flaw. Overly confident, character flaw. His power being used against him, plot flaw. Obviously, the spaghetti legs scene was something that was written into the plot so that Tom would have the ability to save Sonic rather than the other way around. Sonic having no sense of direction was written specifically into the plot so that Tom would have to be the one to drive Sonic to San Francisco. Having the ability to use Sonic's power against him, written into the plot so that Robotnik would have the ability to combat his speed. All these things help keep the character balanced. It helps us believe that he could be beaten, that it's not impossible even though he is the fastest thing alive. And even his character flaws play a role in this. His mental state is what causes his location to be known, and his overconfidence is what causes him to almost be killed by Robotnik. It's because he believes that he has full control of the story, that he'll be just fine, and it's just not true. With all of these characters, it's obvious that there's a lot of thought put into them. How can they be powerful in this story? How can they have the power that I want them to have, while also not having too much control? And there's a certain balancing act that you need to do. You need to write it in the plot so that they don't have too much control, but you also need to write it in the character alone. One of the biggest mistakes a writer can make is not wanting their character to get too beat up. By all means, beat up your character. It's more believable for an audience to see a character make mistakes and get beat up than it is for them to see a character that's just always making the right decision, always right. But also, watching a character struggle, watching a character get beat up, makes it all the more satisfying when the character wins at the end. It makes it feel deserved, earned when they resolve the conflict. It's because they were struggling for this entire story. It's because they were working hard and trying to survive or save others throughout this entire story that it makes the resolution that much more satisfying when they actually do win. So without further ado, let's all talk about overpowered characters in the comments section. I want you to list some of your least favorite, most hated overpowered characters and explain exactly why they are overpowered trash. That is your assignment. Or if you'd like, you can also name a character who is very powerful and explain why they are not overpowered, why they're not Mary Sue or Gary Stews. And as usual, thank you guys for watching. Remember to like the video. I'll see you next time. Bye!
Program restart.